And welcome to the stage, your speakers for today, Julie and Brian.
All right, how's it going, everyone? Good morning. Oh, they sound sleepy, Julie.
We are going to lift these energy spirits up.
Okay, let's try this again. Good morning, everyone. All right, it's a little bit more energy. We'll take it for now, but we expect more later, just so you know, okay? So, as you know, we are Brian and Julie, just so you're not confused. And you just heard some pretty stuffy bios about us that just like blah, blah, blah about our school and whatnot. Who cares? Let's get into the nitty gritty. I think it's really fun to share a fun fact about ourselves with you folks. You can just get to know us a little bit better. And why don't you start us off, Julie?
So a fun fact about me, and you may not know this, is that a couple years ago, I went solo backpacking on my own to Southeast Asia. And so I did all of Thailand, stayed in hostels, also did part of Vietnam. And, it was an experience that really pushed me outside my comfort zone. I would highly recommend travel.
That's really so fun. Cool. I did not know that, actually. So mine, I think, is maybe a little bit less cool, but it was big for me. Actually, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but after a national summit of Jack.org, I was in Toronto, and the day after, I was just decided to be really spontaneous, and I got my first tattoo almost a year ago now. And that's big for me because I don't do spontaneity well, so the fact that I just was woke up and I'm getting a tattoo today was a pretty big deal for me. So there you are. Yeah, that's my fun fact. So now that you know just a little bit more about us, let's dive into why we're here. I'm sure you're wondering, what is this Jack.org business behind me? And we're so excited to be here with you today to have a conversation about mental health and talk to you about how we can all become part of the mental health revolution in Canada. And may or may not be with Jack.org. We hope it is. So Jack.org is a national movement of young leaders working to revolutionize youth mental health. And we do this through a variety of ways, one of which is this amazing talk that we're doing today.
And before we get into sort of the nitty gritty, we want to extend first a couple thank yous. So first of all, our organizer who made this all possible, Sarah. Can you guys give her all a round of applause?
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. And then also super important to highlight our mental health supports in the room. So we have two really awesome mental health supports here in the room. Guidance counselors, we have Michael and Simon. Over here on the right.
They're waving over there. If you folks need anything during the presentation, just find Michael and Simon. Absolutely, anytime.
And then also, of course, we want to thank you guys for being here, for taking some time out of your day to really take in something that we think is pretty important.
We do, yeah. We're really excited to be here. And with that, let's dive in a little bit into the mental health landscape. Let's talk about what's going on in our community. And I think the first thing we need to know when we're talking about mental health is that 1 in 5 Canadians will struggle with their mental health in any given year. 1 in 5 of us.
The thing is that only 1 in 4 will get the support that they need. And that's a pretty staggering statistic.
Absolutely. That means that, again, I'm not great at math, but that means that 75% of those who struggle with their mental health do not get the help that they need. That's huge. And then moving on, suicide is the number 1 health-related cause of death for young people in Canada. The number 1. This is something that we have the power to change. We can take action on mental health with the hopes that more young people don't die by suicide.
Exactly. And specifically in Ontario, so in the community that we live in, 12,000 children and youth are waiting to access mental health services.
It's a lot. It's a lot. Also in Ontario, since 2007, there's been a 67% increase in hospitalizations for children and youth seeking treatment. 67%. That's a very big number.
It's a big number.
Yeah. All right. With that,
now we're going to get into a couple questions, and this is not meant for you guys to be quizzed right now. Hopefully, by the end of it, you'll have some more information.
Absolutely.
You'll be able to talk a little bit more about mental health. But for now, we just want you to reflect on a couple questions. So, how many of you guys think that you have a pretty good idea what mental health is? You can say that.
Show of hands. Okay. What would you say? Is about 60% of the room?
Yeah,
that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, so the next question that we have is, do you know how to be there for yourself and others? Do you know how to support and take care of yourself and then support others in your friends or peers or loved ones? Show of hands again.
A little bit less this time.
Yeah, okay, not as many. Don't worry, I've got great news for you. We will cover that very, very soon and share some awesome tools and things for you to help you remember and learn how to be there for someone.
Absolutely. And last but not least, one more question. Do you know how to take action on mental health? Now here we're referring to a little bit of a larger scale, like in
Absolutely.
your community as a youth. Do you know how to take action on initiatives that support mental health? How many you guys think so? Show of hands.
Okay,
a little bit
not
less.
as many. We will cover that though. We've got you covered, so don't you worry. We will get to that at the end of the presentation. So now, listen, Julie, I think it's really important when we go to schools like this for the young folks in the room and for everyone really to understand why it is that we're so passionate about talking about mental health and why we take time out of our, well, we're not really that busy. I was going to say out of our busy schedules, but we're really not that busy. But out of our schedules to come here to this awesome school and have this mental health conversation with you. And I think, for me anyways, it's really important that you all understand why I'm passionate and kind of what brought me here today and why I think the time to talk about mental health has to be now. So in order to do so, we have to go on a little journey. We're going to go back in time to when I was 5 years old. Now listen, I know what you all are thinking. You're like groaning. You're like, oh my God, 5 years old, that's so long ago. We're going to be here forever. Don't worry, we'll skip some parts in the middle. But when I was 5 years old, I was going to school in rural Manitoba. And I just felt like I didn't fit in with the rest of my class. I felt somehow different, like there was a big difference. And I didn't know what it was, but I just knew that I didn't fit in and I didn't really have a lot of friends. As I continued to get older, my peers also picked up on these differences and I became a really easy target of bullying. When I was bullied in school, when I was really young, it kind of just looked like getting picked last for recess and no one wanted to be my partner in class, which when you're 7, that's like incredibly devastating. When I look back at it now, it's not that bad. But when you're 7 years old, that's so devastating. As I continued to get older, social media became a thing in my community, and it was huge. Who here, does anybody remember like MSN or dial up your internet and log on to MSN? Okay, I'm totally aging myself. No one in the audience knows what I'm talking about. So like before Facebook, we had MSN and I would log on to MSN, I'd log on to Facebook to chat with my friends. But unfortunately, that bullying would just continue all night on social media and I would be cyberbullied. Kids would call me gay, they'd call me just awful, rude, derogatory terms that really stuck with me and made me feel like I didn't want to go to school. I would get super anxious thinking about school. My palms would get sweaty, my heart would race. And I felt really, really bad about myself. I didn't like who I was. I didn't think like anyone else liked me. And I was really depressed. When I got a little bit older and I moved to high school, the bullying kind of subsided. You know, folks get older, kids grow up, you learn not to do that anymore. But those feelings I had didn't go away. I didn't know how to talk about them. I didn't know how to reach out for help. And I didn't have the vocabulary to be able to express how I was feeling. We didn't learn it in my school. And in grade 9, when my mom got really, really ill with cancer, all those feelings I had just bubbled up and over, and I was in, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, a mental health crisis. I had to be hospitalized twice during high school for my mental health. And when I got out of the hospital the second time, I was like, this is the time that I need to talk about my mental health. I know that I need to tell someone how I'm feeling. I need to reach out and find support in my community. And that's what I did. I found the one teacher in my building who I could open up to. I told her I was gay. I told her that I'd been struggling with my mental health. I told her where I'd been. And I opened up and I had that mental health conversation. And let me tell you, the one thing I learned in doing that is that it is so important that we have those mental health conversations, because the more I talked about it, A, the easier it became, and B, the more I realized I was totally not alone and that there were other people in my community who were also struggling and having trouble talking about their mental health. Which is why, to tie it all back in, I'm here today. I think it's so important that we educate young people about how to have those mental health conversations so that we can open up and talk about these things that are really important to us. So that's why I'm here, and you'll notice in my story, Julie, I shared a couple things about like being in a mental health crisis and my mental health and struggles and such like that. So I think what would be really useful now is if we watch this video and talk about mental health.
Well, thank you, Brian, for sharing this super inspiring, powerful story. Can we give a round of applause for Brian?
Thank you.
And now that we understand the importance of talking about mental health and really normalizing those conversations, let's get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty and talk about what mental health is. And so here we have a short video to explain to you guys.
Yeah, let's take a look.
So hopefully you guys understand a little bit more about mental health and how it moves along a spectrum. You know, it can really fluctuate, and that could be from day to day. We could move along from healthy, stressed, and we know that for us, we were just on our way here and there was a lot of traffic. It was pretty stressful.
It was pretty stressful, yeah, I gotta say.
But you know what? We got here, we got our game faces on, we got back to a positive state, and we're able to get here and get this presentation going.
We're back in that healthy area of the spectrum.
Absolutely. However, the other end of the spectrum, which is struggling and crisis, can be a little bit more tricky to identify, and so Brian is going to help us understand when something might be a struggle and what we need to look out for.
Totally. Yeah, so you heard some of these things in my story when I was talking about struggling with my mental health and being in a mental health crisis. And so there's some things that we really want to look for when we're talking about that struggling or that crisis area of the spectrum. So to start us off, remember, mental health has to do with our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors, just as a little recap for you. So when we're trying to identify struggle, we need to keep those three things in mind. And we're looking for changes that are intense, long-lasting, and have a big impact on your life. Intense means that it's like pretty severe. You know, we're not talking like, you know, I'm like sad for a day or you know, something happens in my life and, you know, I have a good cry about it. Crying's totally okay, men in the room, it's okay to cry. But we're talking about like intensity being that like it's happening a lot and it's starting to have an impact on our lives. Long-lasting means, again, it's not just that one day off kind of thing. You know, we all have tough days, fail that exam, stress at work, whatever it may be. Long-lasting means that it's happening for a little bit longer, maybe a week, 2 weeks, a month, and that just doesn't seem to be getting any better. And then finally, big impact means that it's having a severe big impact on our lives. So an example I like to use is a friend of mine who, I'm so not athletic, but we'll use sports as my example. A friend of mine who I play volleyball with has not been coming to volleyball practice lately. It's an intense, severe thing that's happening. He loves volleyball and he's suddenly not coming anymore. I think something might be wrong. It's long lasting, it's been happening for weeks on end, and it's definitely having a big impact. You know what, he's not coming to school, he's not coming to his practices, maybe his grades are slipping, he's definitely not getting any better at volleyball not being at practice. So we know that this very likely could be a struggle.
And now getting into the crisis part.
Yeah.
So crisis is really important to identify that really that means risk of harm to themselves, for someone to be a risk of harm to themselves or someone else. And at this point, the emergency services would be needing to be contacted.
Absolutely. Now listen, Julie, I don't know if I told the folks in the audience yet, but I think you know this, that when I give presentations, I can read minds. And I can read all your minds right now. It's a great skill, I know. And I know you're thinking, okay, that's really cool. These two really cool people came in from Toronto. They're talking to us about mental health. It's so great. Julie and Brian, brah. We now know what mental health is. We got that down. We know about the dual spectrum. We've got that down. But I'm not really sure about all this like identifying a struggle stuff. So I've got good news for you. We're going to walk you through a little quick scenario to help you truly understand how to identify a struggle.
So before we get into the example, we want to do a little bit of a survey here.
Yeah.
So we want to see what kind of social media you guys are into these days. So how about Facebook? Who's into Facebook? Show of hands.
Me. Definitely me. I'm so excited about Facebook, I like knocked your mic right out of your hand. I love Facebook, but I'm seeing nobody else in the room.
Not many hands up in the room.
All the teachers have their hands up, but no one else does.
And how about, so what about Instagram? Instagram users up here?
Seeing some more hands.
More
Seeing
hands,
some more
yeah.
hands. Yeah, absolutely. Snapchat? Oh, okay. Snapchat's clear the big winner. Okay, so we'll use Snapchat for example. I gotta tell you, I am not good at Snapchat, but I'll try my best, okay? So listen, my friend from volleyball practice earlier, he's also been making some posts on his Snapchat and his Snap Story. Is that his Snap Story? Yeah. His Snap Story, posting like with bitmojis of him like being sad and all these things. And I have a feeling that something might be going on, but I'm not quite sure. Who here thinks, you know, it's only been a couple days, who here thinks that my friend, maybe he's struggling? I don't know. What do you guys think? Who here thinks that maybe he's just in that stressed area of the spectrum? Some hands. Okay. Who here thinks he might be struggling with his mental health? About half and half. So yeah, so remember, it's only been a couple days. I'm seeing some things, but it's not happening over and over again. He very likely may be struggling, but I'm not quite sure yet. But listen, it's now been 2 weeks. Those posts have not stopped. They've been getting more and more intense, and they're happening more and more frequently. I have a feeling something more severe is at stake here, and something's really going down for him. Who here thinks that my friend might be really struggling with his mental health at this point?
Okay, a couple more hands.
Yeah, definitely. And then listen, it's been a couple weeks now, and he's made some posts being like, listen, I don't want to be here anymore. I just want to give up. He's in a really negative, dark place, and I have a feeling that it's more severe than a struggle even. I think that he might be in a crisis. Who here thinks that my friend might be in a mental health crisis? Who here thinks he's still just struggling? Yeah, definitely hands are saying that he's in a crisis. I agree with you. I definitely think that my friend is in a mental health crisis, and it's definitely time to reach out and support him. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later.
So now that we understand better how to recognize when we may be in a struggle or when there's a crisis, we're going to go into how we can be there for ourselves. And so there's really 3 parts here. We're going to dive into each one a little bit more. First is check in with ourselves and our mental health. The second is to do what we need to do, and that's really those self-care strategies. And the third is to seek help when we need it.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. Check in with yourself is such an important part of being there for yourself. The first question we want you to consider is, how are you practicing self-compassion? Now I know, I remember, I can read minds, you're all like, oh, Brian, self-compassion. But it's so important. It's so important because the way that we talk to ourselves is not how we would talk to other people. At least that's the case for me. Let's take my friend from volleyball practice from our example a little while ago. You know, when he was struggling with his mental health and posting on Snapchat, I wouldn't be like, just suck it up, get over it. I would reach out, I would support them, I would want to be there for that person. And we should apply that very same logic to ourselves and treat ourselves the very same way. The other thing we need to consider is, what does feeling unwell even look like for us? And it looks different for different people. I know even between Julie and I, it probably looks very different. I know for me, feeling unwell looks like not being able to leave my room, not being able to get out of bed, and I have so many amazing things in my life that fill me up. So I know that if I'm really struggling and I can't leave my house, that there's definitely something going on and I need to check in with myself.
And then the second part is to do what we need to do. And really I want to mention one piece, which is self-esteem. And that ties a lot into our mental health, because when we're doing things that positively build our self-esteem, we also experience more positive and better mental health. And so doing things that give us a sense of competence, a sense of control, and that also would probably give us a sense of community and connection to our surroundings. And so what sorts of things fill you back up, Brian?
Well, I know you mentioned earlier yoga. It's definitely not yoga at all. And it's not volleyball from earlier either. It's definitely something a little bit more artistic, singing, listening to music, playing instruments, something like that for sure.
Yeah, and I know for me, there's a couple different things. Artistically, I love writing.
Yeah.
I love going on runs as well. I find it just gets all the stress out and clears my mind.
Totally. The last thing that we need to consider is seek help when you need it. Now, I know this probably sounds easier said than done, but it's such an important step of being there for yourself. How open are you to reaching out for help? And I think this is a really important question to ask yourselves. How open are you to having what can be sometimes a very awkward, uncomfortable conversation, but maybe one that really needs to happen? The second one, and I think very important also, is who can you talk to if you're struggling? You remember in my story, I reached out to my teacher. I felt that they were the best person for me to reach out to, and they were there for me. We had a really great conversation. It was awkward, it was uncomfortable, but it was really important that I did that. So understanding who you can talk to if you're struggling, big part of the step. And actually, we're going to give you maybe a couple seconds to think about this and mull it over. They're thinking. All right, yeah, so listen, I can see the wheels turning in your heads. I know that some of you folks have thought of someone, but if you're having trouble thinking of someone, don't worry, we've got you covered. We have some list of resources here on the board behind me. So who can we reach out to? Maybe it's as simple as a trusted friend or a trusted adult in the community. Maybe it's an elder or community leader. It could be a counseling center, an anonymous helpline. It could be even something more formal like a family doctor as well.
Yeah, perfect. And then to extend upon the resources that you shared, there's also, so Kids Help Phone is really great. That's for high school students. We also have Good to Talk for the university level. And there's also a crisis text line. And believe it or not, there's actually trained counselors that you can just text. It's really as simple as that.
Yeah, it's so easy. 686868, text, boom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you need more resources, you can go to kidshelphone.ca/resources around me. We did a quick search today and we found a ton of resources in this area. And really all these supports, what we can expect really is someone who will listen, a chance to really process, maybe make a bit of an action plan, and perhaps some of these more professional resources can even diagnose an issue.
Absolutely. Yeah, and building on that, Julie, I think there are some really important things to keep in mind when we're reaching out for the first time, when we're reaching out for the second time, when we're reaching out at all. And the first one is that there's no problem that is too big or too small. Listen, your feelings are valid, you deserve help. Something small is, for me, it could be not being able to leave my bed. Maybe I think that that's not worthy of going to a counseling appointment. It's so not true. If it's impacting my life, it has a big impact, it's long lasting, all those things. If I feel like I'm struggling and I'm not well, I absolutely should reach out for help no matter how big or small the issue is. The other thing to keep in mind is that there are so many different types of resources. For one issue, it might be as simple as talking to a trusted friend and talking it through. Maybe for other things, I need to go to a counseling appointment or go see my therapist, whatever it looks like. Mental health is complex, so is the support, and there's so many different types of resources available. And then finally, I think the most important one here, please don't give up. If at first you don't succeed, try again. Listen, the first time I reached out for help, I didn't really vibe with my therapist. We didn't have great connection, it didn't feel right. I went to someone new. Sometimes it takes going and trying a couple different people until you find the person that you can really connect with. It's so important that you have that connection, so if it doesn't happen right away, please don't feel discouraged. Keep trying and don't give up.
And I'm going to take this moment to jump right into my story. I know that for me it was a process to get the support I needed, but for a minute I want to rewind. So let's go back to my middle school days. So in middle school I was super bubbly, really active person, super engaged, had a lot of friends, did a lot of extracurricular activities, and really the type of person I am now, really energetic. But going to high school, I found I started to feel more stressed and overwhelmed. The course load and starting to think about what I wanted to do with my future. I was also in a private school at the time, and so I felt like there was a lot of academic pressure and exams going on. And not to mention at home, there was also a tough situation going on where my parents were heading towards a divorce. And that was when I started struggling with some really tough emotions. And I remember during an exam one day, I was in an exam and I just felt so overwhelmed I couldn't finish the exam. I had to go to the bathroom and I remember breaking down and crying. And in that moment, I realized that I needed to do something. And so I took the opportunity to reach out for help, and I went to the guidance counselor in my school. And I took a step back to take care of my mental health. And to be honest, I was really ashamed at first. I thought I was weak. But over time, I realized that getting help was a really important step in practicing self-care. And so I ended up finishing the school year and switching schools and going to a more supportive school that had a little bit more of a conversation around mental health. And I found that to be super supportive. I developed better tools and I really connected with the resources in my community as well. And so with all that support, reaching out for help and getting in touch with those resources in my community, I felt that I was more equipped to manage my mental health and be in a more positive state regularly. And so that's what we want to encourage you to just really make sure you're reaching out and taking care of yourself if you're struggling.
Thank you so much, Julie. All right, thank you so much, Julie, for sharing that story. I know sometimes it's difficult to tell something so personal, but I think it's so important. So how about a round of applause for Julie?
Thank you.
Amazing, awesome. So listen, remember I told you, Julie, and I told the audience, I can read minds when I do presentations like this. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, okay, that's super cool. Thanks so much, Brian and Julie. You guys are amazing. We now know what mental health is. Check. We know about that dual spectrum. We know how to identify struggle. We know how to be there for ourselves. What is the next thing we need to talk about? And it's how to be there for others. We know how to identify that struggle. How do we support someone when we've identified that struggle? And that's what we're going to talk about now. So let's just roll right in. First thing, I guess I should mention, Julie, I should mention that the important thing to know about when we're talking about the Be There Golden Rules is that we have them in a specific order behind us. But of course, there's no order to this. You can jump in and out wherever you need to, but we're going to go through it this way. So just yeah, bear with us. The first one is say what you see. So let's jump right in. Sometimes the most important thing that we can do when we're opening up that conversation and we're looking to support someone and be there for someone in need is to simply state the facts. Let them know that you've noticed those changes in their thoughts, their feelings, and behaviors. You've identified that that struggle may be intense, long-lasting, and have a big impact on their lives. And you're going to let them know that you care enough to tell them about it.
Perfect. And we really want to make sure we're not assuming, we're just sticking to the facts. You know, so for example, saying, hey Brian, I've noticed you haven't been coming to art class recently. Just checking in with you. So really stating those facts.
Absolutely.
And then the next step is showing that we care. And really that can be as simple as saying, hey, I'm checking in with you because I care and I want to make sure everything's okay. And another part of this step is really being mindful of our body language, our tone of voice, really making sure it's welcoming.
Absolutely. Number 3 is to hear them out. And this one is so important. Listen, I don't know about you folks, but I know that I'm always on my phone. I have it on me all the time. But when I'm having an important conversation like this and I'm looking to be there for a loved one or a peer or someone in my life, I put my phone away. You know, I turn it off, I turn my sound off, I put it away, and I just want to be there in the moment with them. I want to actively listen, and I want them to know that I care enough to just turn everything else off and be there with them for a moment while they're talking to me.
Perfect. And I know for myself, sometimes I just need to rant a bit and to get things out of my head, and so really listening can be sometimes all someone really needs.
Absolutely.
And then the next step is knowing your role. And I know that for myself as well, sometimes I have the tendency to fix, you know, we see someone we care and they might be struggling and we want to automatically just make everything better. But oftentimes that doesn't necessarily help right away. And so we need to know our role, know that we're not a professional, we're not a therapist, we're a friend, we can be there, but it's really not our job to be that medical professional support. And so that leads us to
connecting them to help. Absolutely, yeah. We need to know that it's not our job to fix their problems as much as we may want to. It's not our job to give advice. It is our job to listen, be a good friend, a shoulder to cry on even, and then to connect them to help at the end of the conversation. We know it's not our job. We're not trained enough to do all that therapy and stuff like that, but there are folks and resources out there that can. And we've talked about some of those community resources earlier. We'll talk about them a little bit later, but it's so important that at the end of the conversation, we connect them to a professional. So, listen, that's a lot of information. So important. I actually think be there is one of the most important parts of this entire conversation that we have today. But we really want to make sure that you folks know what it is that we're talking about and you know how to apply these golden rules in common situations. So we're going to dive into some scenarios. Oh, I can already hear the groaning. Can you hear the groaning? Listen, I promise it won't be that bad. It'll be fun. We're going to chat about them. We'll bring them up as a big group. Don't worry, we're not going to put anyone on the spot if you don't want.
Okay. So getting right into it, let's take Sam as an example.
My friend from earlier, the volleyball player, absolutely.
So say we notice some of those signs. We notice the intense, long-lasting, big impact with Sam. And we're thinking of starting that first conversation. And you know, as we were mentioning, that conversation can be awkward. It can be a little nerve-wracking. And so what rules do we want to keep in mind when we're having that first conversation? So we're going to give you guys a minute to just get in pairs and take a moment to reflect on what you think.
Absolutely. All right, and go. All right. Those are some good conversations. I heard some good things. Let's see what they think, Julie.
Okay, perfect. So anyone have any ideas they would like to share? Okay, you just in the back there? Hear them out. Great. Hearing them out, always important to be a listening ear.
Absolutely, yeah.
We do want to remember that it's most important that we start with say what you see. It really lays the groundwork to, you know, just point out the facts and not put our own assumptions and just understand the situation and the facts a little bit more. And then the second one is show that you care. So we also want to set the groundwork with that because showing that we care will really make the person feel comfortable, you know, talking about something that can be really tough.
Absolutely. It's the first time we're having this conversation, so we want to really, like you said, set the groundwork and set the tone for the conversation and let them know that we care enough to reach out to them. We care enough to let them know that we've noticed these changes and we're here to support them and be there for them. All right, so listen. So Sam, our friend from earlier, who was posting on Snapchat on his Snap story, has been struggling. We reached out for that first time, and we didn't really get a great reaction from Sam. When we reached out, he was like, "Dude, I don't want to talk about it. Leave me alone. It's none of your business," and kind of walked away. What do you think? What are some be their golden rules that we can apply in this situation? What do you think we should do essentially? So again, we're gonna do the same thing as before. We'll let you folks kind of discuss in your little pairs, and then we will chat about it as a big group. And go. All right, I heard some good things over here, Julie. Let's see what they're thinking. What did you think? What should we do? What kind of be their golden rules should we apply in this situation? Absolutely, connect out, totally. That's totally, yeah. Maybe, and I think this ties into know your role, right? Maybe we're not the right person to have that mental health conversation with them. Maybe we don't know them well enough, or they aren't comfortable opening up to us. Maybe it's as easy as just supplying some other resources for them to chat with, or telling a friend of ours that's closer with Sam so that that friend can reach out and have the conversation instead of us. I think another thing that we want to reiterate is that we care about them. We care enough to ask these questions. We care enough to let them know that we've noticed the changes. We just want to keep letting them know that we do care. We don't care that they're missing volleyball practice. We care about their mental health.
Alright, and we're going to continue this scenario a little further. So, say Sam has connected to help, but the first time didn't go so well, didn't feel like he found the right support right away. We want to continue that conversation. So how would we approach this conversation? What rules would we apply here? So we're just going to take another moment to
the drill, yeah.
Get back in those pairs, chat with your partner, and take a minute to do that. Okay, go.
All right.
Okay,
Let's
here's
see
some
what
more
they're
conversations.
thinking. Yeah.
Okay, so who wants to share maybe what you were talking about with your partner here? Okay, yeah, you just on the left here. Know your role, amazing.
Totally.
Always important to know, to be listening and to recognize that we're not professionals, we're not therapists. We also really want to emphasize, hearing them out. It being an ongoing process, we want to make sure we're continuing to be that listening ear. We're not talking about ourselves, we're really being that platform for them. And then we're connecting them to help, and we're helping them look at maybe other resources that may be a better fit.
Yeah, remember we talked about not giving up, right? So the first resource that you reach out to may not be the best one. Just understanding and letting that person know, and letting them know that you'll be there during the process of finding someone that does fit, they do vibe well with. Maybe it's as simple as like walking them to another place or going with them to their appointment. Whatever it might be, we just really want them to know that we care about them and that we're going to stay with them until they find the right support, for sure. Now, the other thing that we should talk about, Julie, and I think is really important, and you talked about this a little bit earlier when we were identifying a struggle, is how to identify a crisis. And remember, just as a recap, crisis is risk of imminent harm. So when we're talking about identifying a crisis and being there for someone in a crisis, we want to make sure that we still can apply these 5 be there golden rules in this time. So the first one, again, is say what you see. We really want to be direct and clear about this. So that might mean that we have to ask some tough questions. It might mean that we have to really be clear and direct about what we're saying. We've noticed these changes in your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. We've noticed that you're really struggling. Are you thinking about suicide? Are you having thoughts of harming yourself or someone else? And know that just because we ask those questions doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to act upon them. It's not giving them an idea to do that. If they're not thinking about that, they'll let you know. But maybe they are thinking about it, and it's pretty good that we asked.
Absolutely. And then in a crisis, the show you care piece. So we want to really stay with them, because if in a crisis, usually we will be contacting that emergency support. And so we want to stay with them, show that we care until that support arrives.
Yeah, under no circumstances do we want to leave that person alone. Hearing them out again means asking those tough questions, but it also means like staying with them. It means staying in that conversation, continuing to ask questions, and letting them know, reiterating constantly that you're there to be there for them, you're there to support them through this process, for sure.
Absolutely. And then again, knowing your role.
Yeah.
Super important to be that friend, be there, hear them out, listen, show you care, but connect them to the help, not be that professional, because professionals are the ones that are trained to deal with a crisis.
Yeah, listen, we don't have like applied suicide skills training, we don't have mental health first aid training necessarily. What we do have is we know the Be There golden rules, and we know how to support someone in need, and we know to apply those golden rules in a crisis. We have to recognize that that does not make us a professional, and we absolutely must reach out and contact someone. Now I know sometimes folks, when we're having this conversation, will raise the concern that their friend may have asked them to keep this a secret. Maybe they don't want anyone to know that they're thinking about harming themselves. It is so crucial and imperative that you contact emergency services. This person is in a crisis, it can be very scary, it's very serious, and they need immediate mental health help, whether it be 911, whether it be a crisis counseling center, whatever it may be. Also know that after you connect them to help, those folks may ask you some questions about the conversation you had, what just happened. After you've done all that, and you've supported that person, you've gotten them through, they're on to the next Connect to Help, know that that can be a really challenging time for you as a supporter. And it's so crucial and imperative that you take some time to be there for yourself, just like we talked about earlier. Self-compassion, self-care, taking that time, knowing what fills you up again, and making sure that you take care of you.
So we've gone through quite a bit today.
Quite a lot, yeah. We've had amazing conversations today, wouldn't you say?
I would say so.
Yeah.
We've learned a lot about mental health. Hopefully you feel more comfortable having that conversation. And we want to take this opportunity to sort of recap a few things. So how to be there for yourself. So that's really remembering to check in with ourselves, practicing self-compassion, and really connecting with supports when we need them.
Absolutely. Next one is to be there for each other. Now listen, I might be naive, but I really believe that we all can support one another. We can live in a society that we take care of each other and accept each other for who we are and what we believe in. And some of that includes those 5 golden rules. Say what you see, show that you care, hear them out, connect to help, and know your role. Remember, they don't have to be in the order that we talked about today, and I just mixed it up for that very reason. Now, let me tell you, the Be There golden rules are so important and so crucial to talk about, but I totally understand that you might forget them. I have great news for you. We launched a brand new platform at Jack.org called Jack.org. And if you want more information on the Be There golden rules and all the amazing stuff that you can do, the Be There movement, make sure you check that out. And you're seeing a sneak peek of it behind me on the screen.
And we want to really encourage you folks to be a part of the revolution. You guys really can be the change in your community and take action on mental health. And so that could be with Jack.org or just in your own personal community.
Absolutely. Remember, we talked about those stats. We have the power to make a difference. We have the power to create change. And it might be with a Jack.org chapter. Our chapter program takes this conversation that we had today and continues it throughout the year through small events and initiatives on campus with like-minded individuals who are passionate about mental health just like we are. Now, maybe the chapter program isn't necessarily for you. Maybe you're a talk speaker. Maybe you want to be up on stage like we are. If you're over 18 and you're heading off to post-secondary or work or whatever you're doing next year, come see us after the talk. We can talk to you about the talks program. But you should definitely start a chapter. Now listen, young people are always at the forefront of these conversations, and we have a little video that drives that point home. Young people are amazing, wouldn't you say?
They are, and we do really have a lot of power to create a positive difference.
Absolutely.
And we're just going to leave now, wrapping things up. We're going to leave the slide with all the resources here. You guys can take out your phone, take a picture of it, keep it in your back pocket for you or someone you care about that might be struggling. And we're just wrapping things up. We want to thank you guys so much for being here.
Folks, we're the best audience ever. You are so supportive of us. Thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing how you take action on mental health in this community. See you later.
See ya.